I am joined today by Kurt Schmidt. With over 2 decades of experience growing professional services firms, Kurt is now helping coach other professional services leaders with operations, sales, and marketing at Schmidt Consulting Group. In addition, Kurt is the host of the Schmidt List podcast and the author of 2 published books, The Little Book of Networking, and most recently, The 10-10-10 Blueprint, How to Craft Your Life with Strategic Precision, which I'm super excited to talk about today. Kurt, thank you so much for joining me today on Cupalo Conversations and being in my orbit.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited. I really enjoy our conversations, and I'm glad we get to have a bit of more of a formal one. I'm excited for that.
That's great. Well, and I'm welcoming, others into this, which I feel very privileged to be able to do. And I'd love to, like I said, I'd love to talk about the new book, but before we dive into that, walk me through your journey. How did you get to where you are today?
Oh boy, that's a long journey, because you can tell by the gray hair. For me, I started out, I was very introverted as a youth. I stayed indoors a lot. And I was bullied a bit in elementary school, so I didn't really want to go out and play and make friends and things like that. But my father was a minister, and he wasn't going to have any of that. Really, he was he lived his life building community, and that's kind of where I got the passion for it. And as I got older, I got into bike riding, so I threw everything and all myself into bike riding, into BMX. And then eventually I turned pro when I was 19 or 20, and I was rated in the top 12 in the world for a couple of years. I started a bike company with a partner of mine. I thought that was going to be it. I was going to make bikes for the rest of my life. But I found during that time of running that company, I found a new passion for design and marketing, and the whole creative side of manufacturing was very interesting to me. So eventually I left that business and went to school for visual communications. And so I got a degree basically in design. And then from there, I went to a very large corporation and realized that that was not for me. I was never supposed to join the Navy. I was always going to be a pirate. So I joined a small agency, and I helped that grow. And then I joined another agency, and that one exploded. We went from 50 to 600 people in about 6-7 years. And then I started my own agency, and now I'm starting my own consultancy. So things over the years, everything that I thought was going to be the next thing was just a jumping off point for the next thing.
Wow. Well, cheers to being a pirate. Seems to have served you well.
Our matey.
Well, I would love to know how does somebody go about crafting their life with strategic precision? And then I'd love to then get into the antithesis of what that approach would look like. So, but let's first start about this approach, because it seems to have served you well, and maybe it's a newer approach.
Yeah, early on, I always had goals for where I wanted to be much further out in my life, and I don't mean from a monetary standpoint. I meant from am I comfortable in my own skin territory? Am I happy with who I've become, who I've crafted myself, right? Because I remember being younger and, getting into my 30s and being kind of pissed at my 20-year-old self going, why didn't you do more stuff, dude? And so I didn't want to disappoint my future self. So I was working on plans on what that looked like further out. And in the book, there's nothing groundbreaking in the book other than, we're taking big goals and we're breaking them down into smaller pieces, which is, pretty standard. But the key unlock in the book is then how do you socialize and share that plan with the people around you? Because anybody can take a plan and break it down into smaller bits. But as you well know, it's very commonly known that we're made up of the 5 people we're closest to. And if we are around successful people, we will be successful. If we're around our high school buddies who still work at an oil change station, like that's probably where we're going to probably where we're going to end up. And so I'm not saying, now it's time to ditch all the people in your life but you do have to take stock of that. And does it match up with where you want to be and what your plan is? So to be strategic is to really understand what is the feeling I want to have, and then what is the closest thing that I know of that gives me that feeling, and how can I turn that into a long-term goal to be at that place? And that could be a physical place, it could be a mental, a spiritual place, whichever.
In order to surround yourself with those 5 successful people, the people you want to be, do you have to first become the person that they want to be around? Why would they want us in that room? So do we have to become that person first?
Well, honestly, I think you have to be the most curious one versus the most experienced one. Those people that you're trying to go and be around are happy to share their information to people that are genuinely interested. But if you're doing it for some nefarious reason, if you're trying to expand their, car's warranty, it's none of those things are going to work out. But if you've got genuine curiosity and you're going into a field, a group, interesting people that you want to be more like, or you think you might want to be more like, because that's the key. You don't know for sure until you kind of get in there. And so that's where curiosity really reigns and takes control. The best leaders, for example, are not the people with the best answers. They're the people with the best questions. So you want to be the person in those groups or entering into those groups with the best questions. And that's how you align yourself with those folks, because you're going to learn the most from those people versus books or a 4-year degree or, all those different things. I mean, look at doctors, for example, right? You go to school for 200 years and then you got to spend a good decade doing the work without being called a doctor or whatever. So nothing beats hands-on experience. So you can read all the books and do all the things. I think that's fine, because that'll help you give an idea. Is this something I'm interested in? But until you can spend time with the people that live that life or around those things, it could just look like the grass is greener and you're just entering a spot where it's not that great.
Yeah, well, that's good. I like your advice. Stay curious, be a curious cat, because I do think people who have a lot of experience and a lot of wisdom also love to share it. That's a big part of our human experience. We like to be generous. And so there's that complementary. You need to have somebody who's interested in hearing and somebody who's interested in sharing. So I appreciate that's great advice. You mentioned about looking in your 30s, looking back on your 20-year-old self, and kind of, I have the same feeling. I was a real schmuck in my 20s. I could have done a lot more. How do you balance, though, the time traveling? Because looking ahead at goals, you're thinking of your future self. So who do I want to be in my 40s, my 50s, my 60s? But how do you stay present without time traveling too much so that you don't miss out on today and what's going on in front of you?
And the answer is in your question, because if I do have a plan, I'm making better decisions in the present. If I know kind of what my goals look like, I can make better choices now. And that has always, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something else I touch on the book, is that you do want to be more present in your everyday life. But every day we have to make hundreds of decisions, thousands of decisions about things. And if I don't know why I'm making those decisions, that will cause even more procrastination. If you have some idea of what that future looks like, I think it actually makes it easier to live in the present, because you know why you're making the decisions you're making. The people around you know why you're making the decisions you're making, because you can clearly articulate the reason why you made those decisions. And you're making less ad hoc and spontaneous decisions.
Great point. I think we are excellent time travelers. Be it we take a photo, and when we take that photo, for example, we think of our future selves looking back on our past selves who took that photo, who was there. It's amazing what we have the capacity to do, and it's easy to get lost sometimes in the past and the future. But I think, to your point, if you know where you're headed, you'll make decisions and you'll be in the present making those decisions with your future self, sort of
100%.
We're amazing in that way. You've mentioned about socializing your your goals, your aspirations, who you are. How important really is that? And who do you think of when you think of socializing that? My fear is that I tend to be a massive people pleaser. I'm guilty as charged here. And sometimes I'll socialize ideas with the hope of inspiring those to accept who I want to become. But if they tend to waver or not support that, that can also make a very fragile goal or fragile state of mind even more so. So walk me through the socialization. How important is it? Who are you thinking of when you're doing that? And maybe some also cautionary tales with that.
Oh, that's great. That's an excellent question, because I could give you a number of examples where for example, when I was first launching my podcast about 7 years ago, I went around and told people for about 2 months that I was going to do this podcast, and people were like, cool. And I was like, and they didn't say, and I remember like my wife coming to me and saying to me, are you waiting for someone to give you permission? And I was like, oh, damn. Yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm going around and telling people I'm interested in doing this thing because I'm waiting for someone to say, you should do that. You're the person to do that thing. And nobody was going to do that. Nobody's going to do that. And so that's when I stopped and I realized, okay, I need to go around and stop asking for permission. Now, that's slightly different than what you asked, because what you were talking about too is that you don't want to necessarily go on the journey alone. You're hoping to bring some people along, right? But that's when you also have to realize, do I need to actually bring people on my journey? What role do they serve? Because they have to have a specific role or a part to play in that journey, right? So if you're the main character, we all got this main character energy, right? Well, who are the supporting roles around you? And do you need those in order to get to a certain level that you want to get to? And not necessarily like you eject them, but do you need their approval? Do you need their buy-in? So for me, about half of the book is about socializing that plan, because again, if I've got an actual plan and I can communicate the plan and I'm building a community to help me execute on that plan, then I'm going to be 90% more successful than anybody else out there. They say, if you write something down, you're 70 to 80% more apt to do that thing because you wrote it down. So imagine not only if you wrote it down, but then you went and told 3 or 4 people you're going to do that thing. That's a great way of building accountability buddies. And my life has been full of account buddies where I've been like, I'm going to do this thing. And then a month later, they're like, did you do that thing? And I'm like, no. Oh, are you not doing that anymore? No, I'm totally doing it. Shoot, I got to go and do that. So for example, with my wife early on, I shared with her, this is kind of where I want to be in 10 years. And this is what I want to do. And this is who I want to be. And so when I'm making decisions week by week, day by day, like, hey, I'm going to this networking event, or hey, I'm flying out to this conference, she's not asking me, why are you doing those things? She knows what the goals are, why those are part of the larger plan. And so it leaves room for better and stronger communication between us, because we both understand kind of what each other's goals and long-term plans are. My relationship with her is 10 times better because of this. And it's 10 times better with the people that I'm closest with around me, because it's an open book. Even my friends from high school, they're like, nobody is like, why are you posting all over LinkedIn and stuff? That's weird. But they know what my plan is. They know why I'm doing those things, because they understand what my plan and my goals are. So they're supportive of it. They just go in and like the post and move on with their day. And so if you can dissect it, build that plan into small pieces, share those larger goals and why you're doing what you're doing with the people that are closest around you, you'd be surprised at how far and how fast you get there. And that's why I wrote the book.
I love it. As Americans, we have this concept of the self-made man. It's sort of romanticized, rags to riches. And I'm curious, given what you've talked about with regards to accountability and having that group of people around you to help support your dreams and also help mirror back who you want to become and remind you of who you want to become, what is your feeling on the philosophy of a self-made man?
Oh, I think it's ridiculous. I think there's no such thing as a self-made self-made man, self-made woman, self-made them, there's no such thing. From the people who helped Oprah get where she got, Elon Musk get where he got, the guy who introduced Steve Jobs to Steve Wozniak in the 70s, like we wouldn't have the iPhone and all these things, if he wouldn't have just made that introduction, because he's like, you like computers and you like computers, I guess I should introduce you guys. And then here we are, right? And you've got Apple Computer. So if you hadn't built a community and a network to support to get you there, you're just never going to make it, right? You got to have a coalition built for you. But we're not taught to do that in our careers and our jobs, is to build a coalition. And we should be doing that. We should be very intentional and very actionable about doing that, because we can't get to where we want to get by ourselves.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of emphasis on the independence component. And to your point, I think it's real shit, because we don't come into this world alone. And hopefully we don't go out of the world alone either. We're always, we're always surrounded by and in need of society and community and people, family and friends. So I appreciate that take, because it is a little countercultural and refreshing. You have mentioned about, again, the strategic goal crafting and how you can take a goal and you can break it down. And what about the antithesis I mentioned? Because there are people who seem to have a little magic that goes into their life where they had no plan and things sort of happen. Now, it doesn't mean they weren't an agent for change or action, but what is the antithesis of your approach that could be effective? Is it the carpe diem, fly by the seat of your pants, live moment to moment? Does that work? And I don't know if you have a story or a person that really embodied that, but because it does seem like there's a few out there who are just these wild cards who have amazing, very successful lives, and they didn't have a plan at all.
Yeah. But if you look at the people that have these very successful lives with no plan, are still surrounded by amazing, talented, and forward-moving, motivated people. I love the story of what's his name, Chris Pratt, the actor. He was a waiter in Hawaii, and he saw a movie star actress came in, and she was there, and he just pestered her while she was at the resort. He just kept pestering, because his goal was to become an actor, and this is like the first like famous person he had met, and he just kept pestering her and pestering her and pestering her. Finally, he got her number, and then he went to California, and she took him to meet a couple and then boom, we get Chris Pratt. So he was a waiter in Hawaii. I mean, I think his plan was to be just kind of a surf bum. That's why he was there, but he got bit with the bug to get into acting and do these things, and then he just went after it like crazy. And that's what's going to happen to everybody, is that this opportunity will show up in front of you, and if you don't have a plan, you can't recognize it, right? So they talk about luck, right? What is luck? Luck is opportunity and timing meet together, but opportunity doesn't just show up. You have to create opportunity. I mean, even people who win the lottery have to drive to the store, buy a lottery ticket, pick up numbers, and then hold on to the thing, and then go back and watch the balls being dropped, and there's still work in that. While it's not much, there's intention behind it.
I think you have to walk through the door in order for there to be an opportunity on the other side of it. And I do think that there is a little magic that goes along with it, but you have to take that first step. You got to drive to the gas station, buy the lottery ticket.
Yeah. Well, and that magic couldn't be just, charisma and working on your, the way that you present yourself to the world. And I don't mean like physical beauty. I mean the way you show up with intention and curiosity and self-worth.
Yeah, absolutely. What about, you mentioned this plan. How often are you revisiting your own plan?
Ooh.
And I would love to also know too, because I mentioned the title of the book, 10-10-10. Yeah. What are the increments of time that those 10 reflect? And how often are you revisiting your own plan?
So 10 years, 10 months, 10 weeks, 10 years out, where do I want to be in my own skin? Where do I want to be? And it doesn't have to be anything solid, like I am this person making this much money and I'm at this place. It can just be a feeling. I mean, I even describe in the book, when you wake up on that 10 years from now, what's the first thing you're doing that morning? And so you start to break it down into those kind of components. And then I look at, okay, well, I want it to be a nice temperature. So that means I need to move somewhere where there's a nice temperature or something. So I might make my 10-month goal to be, I need to travel more to places to see that are more of a temperature that I'm interested in. Are those places of interest for me to move to and live? And then I'll spend 10 weeks building the resources to be able to plan those trips, listen to podcasts, watch YouTube videos. I'll just ingest things for 10 weeks. And once the 10 weeks is done, and again, this isn't 40 hours a week, 40 hours a week type of stuff. It's just we're putting a cap on it, that we're giving ourselves 10 weeks to research, educate, or build resources towards those goals. And then we execute on it. In the 10 months, we have a goal of, we're at least starting our journey to making those trips and going and visiting those places and seeing what it's like and how does it feel. And once you do that, that starts to change the prism towards your 10-year goal, right? Because you might go to a place and be like, well, it isn't the perfect temperature, but wow, like I love the history here. I love this about this. And these are things that I've never experienced before. And I want to be around that more. And so again, the goal is that the 10 years is a rolling 10 years. You never achieve the goal. That's not the point. The point is to always have a target you're shooting at. That way you keep shooting. That way you get better at shooting. And that way that when you do reach a spot where you want to maybe slow down and not follow a 10-10-10 sort of plan, you're in a great spot. Now, but I also mentioned in the book, it doesn't have to be 10-10-10. I just use that because it's an easy math for me and it feels comfortable. But I know people that do 2, 3, 4, or 5, 6, 8, or whatever. So it's just a framework that you can apply any way you like.
How often are you revisiting your plan?
Oh, I didn't answer that question. Okay. I would say a few times a year, in terms of the bigger goal, in terms of the 10 years. Yeah. That's why I have the 10 weeks, because that's where I'm making all my, that's where I'm making all the fine adjustments there.
So in light of maybe this framework, how are you checking in with yourself every day to decide what you want to do in the present today to be able to reach those 10-10-10 goals?
Yeah. I mean, there's some days where I'm like, I'm not doing any of that. Like I'm taking a break. I'm not being purposeful today. I'm going to do a bunch of junk and play some video games and watch a movie. You got to give yourself an ice cream sundae once in a while. You gotta, because otherwise, what are you working towards, right? If you can't enjoy your time while you're doing things. But I will say during a typical work day, my mornings are for thinking and for strategery, as it were. So thinking strategically. So I try to have any work that needs heavy thinking and strategy and coaching and things done in the morning. And then I will try to do some light meditation. And then the afternoon then is hands-on things, like I'm making stuff in the afternoons. And then in the evenings, it's mostly all family time. And then I stay up a little bit later and I work on some personal projects and go to bed. So that's pretty much my daily routine. So
I appreciate your blessing on the ice cream sundae. Not just that I am a huge ice cream fan, which I am, but I also think that there's a lot that makes people feel like, oh, that guy's got to be a robot, right? Like, I mean, insofar as how productive you've been, right? You were a professional athlete. Yeah. You've founded, number of successful companies. You've written 2 successful books. You have a podcast. It's like, what else has he not? And so I appreciate that you weave a little bit of play and fun in there. I think that's very important.
Oh, you have to.
Yeah, and ice cream. You have to have ice cream. Are you proud of yourself?
Oh yeah, 100%. Oh my gosh. I look back to my 20s, and so my father was a pretty amazing person. He was always my hero, and all I ever wanted to do was be like him. And what I found is that I have become like him. Just all the activities and things are very different. And a few years ago, I kind of realized that, yeah, I've kind of reached that goal, that impact that he had on other people's lives, and the value that he brought, knowing that a rising tide lifts all boats. And, he was out there creating that rising tide, right? And so he was also in one of the boats with other people and were raised with him. And I found that a lot of other people are very cynical, very, very, what do you got for me sort of people, where that I just kind of pass them and be like, oh, okay, bye. I'm, keep going. A lot of it is, it's not, magic. It's just self-discipline. It's like, should I be working on this thing or not? Should I be doing this thing or should I not be doing this thing? But I put systems in place that allow me to do things like write my books and do the podcast and all this stuff. I mean, I've got the podcast down where I can record it, produce it, ship it within about 90 minutes. And that's with video and audio, edited, everything. So, but that's, it took me, I just finished episode 279 of the show. So I don't remember doing 300 of anything in my life. So you just get good. You just get good at the stuff, I mean, I was terrible in the beginning. It used to take me 4 to 6 hours a week to produce the show. And
yeah, well, I think you should be proud of yourself. I'm glad to hear that you are. A lot of people don't speak that way. I think there's actually a lot more discussed around shame, imposter syndrome, self-doubt. To your point about the podcast, it takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of effort, and there's growth that happens. And you through that growth, you're proud of yourself. Going back to those cynical people that you passed en route, and with your dad as sort of this North Star, and how amazing that your father was a hero for you. That's incredible. How do you feel about those people, the cynical ones who believe they can't get what they want out of life? I think there's also a great deal of how do I put this, emphasis on what people are not capable of, or that they can't have what they want.
Yeah.
And I'd love to know, what are your feelings towards people who speak like that, who live like that?
Yeah. There's a funny kind of meme from Mad Men where there's two guys in an elevator, and the one guy says to the main character, he says, I think you're a terrible person, terrible human being. And the main character says, I don't think about you at all.
I love that line.
So
Don Draper, my hero.
Yeah, so that's kind of that's kind of me. I just, if you're not gonna bring value to yourself or to me, I'm not that interested. It doesn't have to be you're just bringing value to me. I'm interested in people that are bringing value to themselves. You can see people who bring value to themselves. Those are people I'm attracted to, because I want to latch on to that self-confidence and that learn more. I'm curious, right? How do you look at the world? Just like you're doing, right? How do you look at the world? How can I take bits and pieces of that and complete my puzzle that I'm trying to solve? And so, yeah, the people that are cynical and those things, yeah, those are going to be speed bumps. You're going to run into those people, but you guys got to treat it that way. You just got to speed bump over them and just keep moving on. And if they keep getting in your way, you just got to find more aggressive tactics to move them outside of your peripheral vision, because that's where people will get stuck. They'll get stuck in your peripheral vision, right? So you might follow them, or you might see them on Facebook or Instagram or these other things. Just turn them off. Don't look at those things. Don't get affected by those things. I tell people all the time, I have people, because I do a lot of LinkedIn coaching with folks on how to use LinkedIn. And they're like, well, it's so much like Facebook. And I'm like, first of all, is Facebook anymore? Okay, because it doesn't feel like Facebook anymore. But if you feel like that, you can curate and edit. You don't just have to eat what you're served. You can have the dressing on the side.
Absolutely. That's a really great point about, I love not giving space in your head to think about people who are not adding value to themselves. That's a really great point that you make, because it isn't always about how can you, as you said, are you adding value to me? They'll drag you down. Yeah, but it's not just, are you adding value to me? Are you working on yourself? And it's palpable. You can feel the difference between somebody who invests the time and effort to work on themselves, be it intellectually, be it
Yes.
spiritually, physically, but they're caretakers of themselves and they have that sense of responsibility. I think it's very obvious. So I appreciate that. And
you'll run into those people, because I've run into them at work and I've run into them online, where I call them emotional vampires. And they're just having constant pity parties, and they're inviting you to their pity party, and you don't have to accept the invite. You don't have to go to a pity party.
sometimes I know I've fallen prey to being, I want to be helpful. So I want to show up for those who seem to be in need.
Sure.
And then you recognize they're not showing up for themselves. And there's also this other temptation, which is that they're not doing so hot. So it makes me look a little better. And my ego then grows a little bit bigger. And that's not good for anybody. Well, we can't talk about life, as we've been talking about, without talking about the opposite. And I have two last questions for you.
Yeah.
My second to last question is actually about death. So that is, the fact of life is that it does come to an end. In a lot of ways, that serves as another framework for how we make decisions and who we spend our time with and how we go about, spending the time between A and B. How often do you actually reflect on your own mortality and what you'll be thinking about as you look back on the whole of your life, hopefully, many, many years from now?
Yeah, well, part of it, is just hope for the best, plan for the worst, right? So, have your house in order, have a will. I have, everything is taken care of if some accident happens. So nothing is left to chance. In terms of legacy and things, I will always have a legacy of, in my history as a professional athlete, like that's been well documented. And between the show and the books and the next couple of books that I'm working on, those will be things that I'm excited to leave behind for my boys and my children. And because for example, like I have one tape of my father doing a sermon. It's only one sermon. He's given thousands of them his entire life, but I only have that one sermon. And I'm not a religious person, but I'm a preacher's kid. You're the worst kid. That's just how preacher's kids work. Every preacher's kid is a nightmare, and that's this guy. But I get to listen to that. I'm so privileged to have that and be able to listen to that. And so my hopes is that, when my boys are in their 40s or 50s, they get a kick out of listening to their dad kind of give his feedback on product development. And just, I don't know, they won't care. Just like I don't care what dad's talking about. I just get to hear his voice. So, and it motivates me and empowers me. And so to me, it's about building up a strong community around me, because what I want to do is I want to obviously leave the world better than I found it. And I really feel like the work that I'm doing is doing that. And I'm very confident it is doing that, because I am constantly getting feedback from people thanking me for the guidance, the 10 minutes I spent with them, the whatever. Like, I'm constantly getting great feedback from people, and I'm very humbled by it, that something they read of mine, something they watched, some advice I gave them 10 years ago helped them. It's fantastic. And so I'm just going to do more of that.
I love it. Yeah, well, and I'm one of those people. I'm very grateful that I crossed paths with you. My last question for you today, and you touched on, some aspirations you have around a couple more books you're working on, but what are the next things for you? I would love if you'd share. What are the next things that you're tackling on, the next things that are going to make you even more proud of yourself?
Yeah, to be honest, it's to build a much more formal community. I'm working on a peer advisory group right now and putting the initial plans together. That's really aimed at kind of solopreneurs and people that, or independent business owners that don't have partners. And I want to build a networking group around that. And because what I've found is I've gone out and I've audited a lot of other peer advisory groups. And a lot of them are great because they're very leadership focused or these types of things, but they're not super business focused. And mine is going to be 100% business focused. Now, leadership just kind of plays into that, but is that going to be the focus of it? No. It's going to be about, a place where I can go, why didn't that client email me back? What should I do? I've got my taxes coming up. Who should I talk to? I feel like over the years with the books and these things that I've never had like a central landing zone for all the people that I've helped, right? Like obviously I have a newsletter and, got tons of people that subscribe to that. And I have the podcast and I got a bunch of people that listen to that. But I want to build something a bit more formal, I guess, kind of my own church,
Yeah, that's great. Well, I am so grateful that I feel I'm in this informal community with you as one of those solopreneurs on the peripheral. And I'm very grateful for everything
you're
we
too
talked
kind.
about today and everything that you've done. You've put a lot of great work out into the world and continue to do so. So thank you again, Kurt, for sharing your time. It's very precious, and for all the wisdom today.
No, thank you for the opportunity. I'm blessed and I'm honored to know people like yourself. And my advice to everyone: stay curious.